A very good evening to all the participants. A hearty welcome to all of you for this first webinar on during this 25th Silver Jubilee year celebration of P.N. Panikar's National Reading or Digital Reading Month celebrations. I'm Dr. Vignesh. I'm part of the National Digital Library of India team, and we are one of the co-organizers of this 25th P.N. Panikar National Reading and Digital Reading Month celebrations. And we are very pleased to have our first speaker for this month-long duration. So, like last year, we are very pleased and happy to have Dr. Shadrach, who is already introduced to many of you. And as I used to tell, he's my mentor. He's my how do I say? He's everything. He shaped my career, so he's the one who has given me a lot of opportunities to learn a lot. And as I grow, he has been watching my progress over the past maybe around 14-15 years. And I have seen Shadi as very young, dynamic, and highly thought provoking, and he's someone whom I have always looked upon. Not just me, like me, there are many people, not just in India, outside of India, has looked upon him. So the way I saw him 2 years back, at least 14-15 years back, and today, there is a same amount of energy, dedication, and the commitment he has been showing in terms of uh, the global development. And he has been part of a lot of global development programs, starting with One World International, One World South Asia, telecenter.org, Indian Public Library Movement, Global Academy for Telecenter Operators. He has been a great visionary, and currently he is with the Commonwealth of Learning. He is the Advisor Skills Program, and here he has conceived the Skills for Work program and also Workforce Recovery program. And we are very, very pleased to have Dr. Shadrach for this first session. Today's session topic is importance of reading to survive in the 21st century. And we are very happy to have you, Dr. Shadrach. And now I request Balagopalji has also joined to say a few words about Dr. Shadrach and the session. Over to you, Balagopalji.
Sorry, Dr. Vignesh and our Shadi Saab and other friends assembled here, because my system was had some problem, and my son had also faced some technical issues. So I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm happy now. I have come to in fact, one of my mentors of this library movement and skill development movement, Dr. Shadrach. And Dr. Shadrach, I'm having only high regards to him. And he is not only a friend, he is my friend, philosopher, and guide. And he, in fact, now I am very much associated with him in the skill development program, and that too in the Commonwealth of Learning. And we are one of the partners of this Commonwealth of Learning in the country, India. And in the meantime, I am using this platform to invite the youngsters to join with us and get scholarship and get skilled through our programs that because of this KISS initiative. The national leader, international leader, and he only brought me to this level because he is associated with the library movement for the past 40 to 50 years. He is a man bent for strengthening the library movement, not only strengthening. He wanted to derive the best out of the library movement by the common man, the ordinary man, because this reading mission activities was conceived through him only. But he is our advisor to this national reading mission, and it is my duty and my privilege to have him as my advisor. Not only that, he is associated with all the activities of the P.N. Panikar Foundation in strengthening the libraries of the country. Not only these libraries, not only here, even in the villages, the rural libraries, because Mr. Panikar, P.N. Panikar, was responsible for having libraries in all the villages of the country. In fact, we wrote I am also now replicating his success in setting up the rural libraries in the country, in the state, Kerala state. Now, the PN Padikar Foundation, with the guidance and support of Dr. Shadi and Dr. Vignesh, he's my boy, Dr. Vignesh. We are in the process of setting up 2.7 lakhs digital libraries in the country, in all the country, because the India is having 2.07 lakhs of panchayat. I discussed this issue with our Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, and he readily accepted. Then he asked me, Valgopalji, from where are you mobilizing funds? I said, do not trouble you, sir. I am mobilizing the funds from the elected representatives using MP-led and MLA-led. MP-led fund is now for the current year, it has been suspended because of the COVID pandemic issues and diversion of funds for this massive program of the government of India. But the MLA funds are there. Even MPS funds are also coming. By this year, by October, all of us will get the privilege of having this MLA MP-led fund also. So that through this MP-led fund, we'll be setting up all infrastructure facilities for establishing digital libraries in all the 202.07 lakhs of panchayats, and it's a job opportunity for our librarians also, because we need 2.07 lakhs librarians also, young librarians. We will be not giving much money. We are not giving we are only a PN Punikar Foundation is only a facilitating agency for this. The fund is coming from the collector. The collector is controlling authority, along with panchayat presidents, the local panchayat presidents and local MLAs, all elected representatives of the state of the respected panchayat will be partners, not partners. They will be management. They will have management say over these libraries. And in fact, I was discussing even today also with some of my friends with the Niti Aayog and Dr. Vignesh and Dr. Shadi. Shadi is my real torchbearer for this project. And this is if this, and we want to establish this project by 2025, when the country celebrates its 75th republic. So we are also very tight in taking our steps. My partner is National Digital Library, where Mr. Dr. Vignesh is also servicing. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and because of keeping social distance and other things, our initiative is also running very slow. But however, by October, November, it will be through, and by as per our anticipation, by December, India will be free from this COVID, because at that time we hope that we will achieve 2% dose that vaccine dosage, 2%, not 2%, 2 times vaccine dosage to all youngsters of the country. By the time we can defend our country from this COVID pandemic also. So I welcome Dr. Shadi to this program of skilling, because he is a man now for libraries and skilling. In fact, we are also we welcome. We are one of the partners of this Commonwealth of Learning in the country, and he only made foundation as one of his partner in the country, and we are taking by his advice and his lead. We are implementing in a small way, and our Vignesh ji, his counterpart, is helping me, because he is a employee of National Digital Libraries, or he is not supposed to do, and so he is not associating with me, but he is guiding with me as an advisory capacity. As an advisory capacity, he is guiding with me for this implementation project. And Shadi is the real lifeblood for this project. And moreover, I am obliged to him, because he has given the direction of this reading mission activities since 2020, he is guiding it, not 2020, 1915, because when the Prime Minister inaugurated this program in 2017. Yes, it's 2017. Then we worked out a plan, and based on the aspirations of the Prime Minister and aspirations of all the librarians, teachers, PTA members, students, we have crafted a program to organize this type of webinars to every 1 month. It's not a 1 month program. It's a continuous, lifelong project. It's a library, visiting library, and etc. It's a lifelong project. So, with my heart of heart, I am welcoming my dearest friend, one of my dearest friend, close associate, and my mentor in this library movement, Dr. Shadi, to this August meeting. Dr. Shadi, you are welcome, Shadi. I invited him only yesterday, but he readily accepted. So I am obliged to that respect also. Very kind of you, Shadi, to accept our invitation. In fact, Dr. Vignesh also invited. Vignesh is important person of this movement. He is the advisor for this reading mission webinar, organizing these webinars, etc. is under his direct control, and he has been assigned by National Digital Library of the Government of India to associate with this program for the next 30 days. So I must be grateful to Mr. Dr. Vignesh also, and inviting Dr. Shadi once more to this August meeting. Thank you, Shadi.
Thank you. Thank you, Balagopalji. It's a pleasure for me to be with each one of you. Congratulations on the 25th anniversary of the reading mission. It's a silver jubilee year, and it's a very important year that the state of Kerala, through your leadership, has been spearheading in the entire world. And in India in particular, with regard to the reading mission that you have initiated in 2007, inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India in Kochi in the month of June 2017, we see a greater opportunity for us to stimulate the culture of reading, the habit of reading, and reading with a purpose. And today I have been asked to speak to the August gathering, who I understand a lot more of you of our school teachers. So I'm glad to be able to connect up with you. And the topic given to me is the importance of reading to survive in the 21st century. It's an important topic because we are in the 21st century, which is globally connected. It's a globally and digitally interconnected world. And from cradle to career, we have an opportunity as educators, as school, college, university teachers, vocational education teachers, to spread new skills and knowledge to our pupils, our learners, our students to succeed. And if we want to prepare our children for success in school, work, and life, the 21st century skills are essential. And in a moment, we will see what these 21st century skills are. But these are important. Not only these provide a framework for successful learning in classrooms, but also for the students to thrive in a world where the word change is constant, and the learning can never stop. And it is estimated that the permanent job phenomenon of the permanent job is not going to be there anymore in the world. Perhaps a very, very small minuscule of people who might join the government service or similar services in the public sector might be able to retain their jobs, whereas 98% of the labor force, the workforce, is likely to constantly change, evolve. And I'm sure teachers also are going to face, to some extent, the heat of it. Although teaching is a noble profession, and you can continue to stay as a teacher for until your retirement, But even in teaching profession, although the change in career may not be a prominent factor, but lifelong learning is likely to be a prominent factor. So for a majority of workforce that's going to change career, lifelong learning is important. And for even for teaching profession, lifelong learning is important, because the workforce needs these skills to compete in the global economy. And only then the companies will thrive. Only when companies thrive and provide employment, people are going to have enough money to spend. Only when they spend, the government can gather tax, and only then the government can also govern people effectively. So it's all dependent on employment and livelihood generation. And for those, we need skills. And in the 21st century, we need to be engaged globally. And also we need certain skills that are extremely important. Let's quickly go over and see what skills that we are talking about in the 21st century. WEF, the World Economic Forum, OECD countries, many major consultancy firms like McKinsey, and also certain global governments have come up with a list of skills that are important to survive in the 21st century. And we'll see why reading is important in order to nurture these skills in a moment. What are these 21st century skills? These are critical thinking skills, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, creativity, imagination, and innovative skills. These skills are also collaboration and teamwork related skills, so that those who have these skills are able to thrive in the world. You also need, as part of 21st century skills, better communication and conflict resolution. We need research skills, information literacy skills, media literacy skills, digital literacy skills, technology literacy skills. We need to be flexible and adaptable. We need to be able to self-direct our own lives, but at the same time have social and cross-cultural interaction amongst people that we work with. And finally, when it comes to being productive, we need to be accountable with productivity skills, but also what they call the global citizenship. So in all these skills that I referred to, I have not mentioned much about the technical skills or the subjects that we teach in schools. Of course, all the subjects we teach in schools are very, very important, starting with language, sociology, environmental sciences, science and mathematics. All these are the foundations for honing and effectively gaining these skills. But we need consciously to inculcate these skills and inbuild these skills in our teaching in such a way that, in other words, students are able to develop cogent reasoning when it comes to coming out of schools. They need also to develop the evidence collection skills, research, information literacy, and others that we talked about. And of course, they need to be critically thinkers. They need to be problem solvers. They need to analyze things that are presented to them, and they need to communicate well. So these are the skills that are important in the 21st century for anybody to survive. So what is the definition of, in this context, reading? Let us keep for a moment at the back of our minds the 21st century skills that I referred to, starting with critical thinking, to collaboration, to teamwork, to communication, to analytical thinking, to evidence collection, to cogent reasoning and whatnot. But in this background, let us look at reading as an important factor in the early childhood and going forward. What is the definition of reading? Reading is stated to be a cognitive process that involves decoding symbols to arrive at a meaning. It's a cognitive process that involves decoding symbols to arrive at a meaning. And symbols are usually these days in letters and words and pictures and whatnot. It's also an active process of constructing meanings of words. So when there are several words put together while reading, we constantly, as we go in the fly, we are able to process the constructive meaning and constructing the meaning itself as we read. And reading with a purpose helps the reader to direct the information gained through reading to gain further focus to their attention and thinking process. So the definition might sound very complex, but when you actually distill down to gaining an understanding of what do you read, we read a lot of things. We read letters, we read words, we read pictures, as I mentioned. We read abstract concepts. We read formulas when it comes to mathematics, science. We read the rational approach. We read minds at times when it comes to interpersonal, sociological, and psychological issues and relational matters. We also read poems, horoscopes. We read many things in life. But the purpose of reading at that point in time and every moment of our life, for that matter, whether we read a book, whether we browse a website, or whether we interact with people, whether we read people's minds, whether we read the situation, we are trying to connect ideas that we already know by that reading so that we can strengthen our concept and also the idea of the subject. Now, if we don't have an idea of what we are reading or the subject that we are relating to, it's not going to be very effective. So for that, we need to actually have a framework of mind for reading and understanding and storing information. That's very important. And how do we read? We usually read, as it is stated, there are 4 types of reading. We skim. Sometimes we go through this text to get a gist of what is being presented by the author or the writer. We scan. Sometimes we gather a particular information in a given context. So that's why they say scanning of literature when it comes to literature review. So we scan a range of information and informational objects so that we can gather information in a particular given context. We also indulge in intensive reading, whereby we want to closely read to gain accuracy and comprehend what is presented. And one can really state many of the very epics and spiritual texts and others are read this way, that we closely read to gain accuracy and comprehend what is presented. We also read extensively. Rather than gaining accuracy in this case, we want to gain fluency and also spread of knowledge. So we extensively read. We read anything and everything. So there are these types of reading that we indulge in. But as I mentioned earlier, emanating from the definition, what are the essential skills that we need to have to read and comprehend? And this is where I think as teachers and educators and students and people as part of the reading movement, we need to understand how can we gain these skills and what are the skills that we are talking about. As I earlier mentioned, we need the skills to decode. And this is why you see decoding is something very interesting. You don't need to actually have written or read anything. You need to actually, even by hearing, you can decode things. That's one of the reasons as kids we were taught rhymes to decode certain phonemic awareness, what they call, or phonological awareness, to gain an understanding and already hear and repeat and decode. So the children may not have read or written those poems or rhymes that we teach, but they already develop the decoding skills. We also need, in the long run, fluency. Gaining fluency is very important because this is where we are able to develop that skill of citing words in one go and move on with gaining an understanding as we read. We also need skills to gain control over vocabulary, and many people have a lot of vocabulary on their sleeves, so that they are able to actually use a number of words and derive meanings of those words in their daily life. And in order to hone these skills, we usually provide opportunities for children to play word games and develop vocabulary skills in the long run. We also need skills to construct sentences and cohesion. This is where we find a major problem in India. Pratham's ASER report every year clearly categorically states that many children are not able to construct sentences and also in a cohesive manner. And this is possible not only by reading, it's also, sentence construction is also a writing skill, where one learns to connect ideas in sentences. And so it is important for us to teach children to connect two or more ideas in a sentence, so that they are able to develop that skill to not only present their ideas, but also understand sentences. And while reading, this helps in order for them to easily grasp those ideas presented by the author in those sentences. We also need to have skills around reasoning and background knowledge. Without background knowledge, we cannot really understand anything that we read, or we cannot read between the lines, as they say. We need to relate with the text being read and presented to us. This is where life experiences, TV shows, reading the newspapers, even watching movies could help. And as teachers, we could encourage people, our pupils, to actually come up with open-ended questions, or you can come up with open-ended questions to make children think, so that they can reason and apply their own background knowledge, particularly emanating from their own life experiences at home, at playgrounds, at place of networking, with being with friends. You can create open-ended questions so that they are able to use background knowledge and reasoning to hone their ability to develop those skills so that they can read well. And finally, we also need to enable our children to gain skills in memory and attention. Paying attention to what one reads is very important. Otherwise, we can be reading things without paying attention as a verbatim. And we see many children read like that. They simply read without gaining an understanding, which means there is no working memory that allows them to retain that information that they read. And only when they have the skill to retain that working memory, they would be able to use use that memory and attention that they paid to relate with what they read. So everyday activities, playing active games, all these are helpful in honing these skills. Now, how do we read? They call it principles of reading. To begin with, we help children to read at a normal speed and silently. Quite often people, children read very loudly and read it out. It's good for phonetic and gaining a good control over your phonetics and expressions and how you actually pronounce words. But oftentimes when it comes to comprehending and gaining a knowledge and relating with the background information presented, it's suggested that at a normal speed you read silently, but at the same time you have to train to gain fluency in reading. So the next principle of reading, apart from reading at a silent and at a pace that they are comfortable with, is to train children to guess meaning of unfamiliar words. Oftentimes when we read, we come across unfamiliar words. Instead of quickly jumping to looking at a dictionary, we should train children to actually guess meanings of unfamiliar words through the context, or the context in which the story or the passage or the sentence is presented, so that some guesswork is not bad. And we should also train children to skip unnecessary information temporarily, not avoid it, but while distilling a meaning and inferring meaning out of the sentences that they read, it's important to skip certain unnecessary information that's presented. Sometimes authors and writers do present information of that kind. We also help children to scan the text to gain necessary information as quickly as possible. And that's where scanning and skimming also at times helps to gain a gist of the material presented and gain a kind of a quick understanding of what is presented. Now, we should also train our children and students to distinguish between opinion and facts. Quite often, this is where, in the 21st century, we see in a connected world where social media rules the roost. Quite often, non-factual disinformation, misinformation also gets carried out and passed on. So this is where we need children to look for facts, but also distinguish between opinions and facts. And in doing so, we should also try to infer the mood of the writer. The writer can be mischievous. The writer can be politically motivated. Writer can be a person who is willing to bring disharmony in society. So the mood of the writers and the person who presents is very important, so that we can infer and gain a grasp of what he or she is trying to say. And finally, we should also try to come up whenever we read, whether we read a paragraph or a page or a story, in our minds, we should always get that headlines. What is that I'm reading? What is this story about? What is this being communicated to me? So we should actually, come down to, once we read, the ability to actually say, okay, this is the headlines. This is what I understood. This is how it's going to be. So the two-pager information can be actually brought down to a two-liner in our comprehension. Now, I mentioned that we need to gain fluency in reading. And how do we read it? How do we gain fluency? And quite often we see, he's a voracious reader. He's, this person, she has read very well, and all that we hear. How do they develop those skills? They do that by reading in chunks. So they are able to focus on 5 or 4 or 6 words in a single glance and start inferring meanings to sentences, as I mentioned. Also gaining meaning to unfamiliar words, so that they can rather use clues and structure and context of the text to get the meaning. And they also do some previewing. They pay attention to headlines, subheadings, box items, quotes. So they are able to, comprehend and read in full. And they also are able to anticipate, guess what is likely to be said next. And that helps in the speed of reading. And if you don't know what is coming up, and if you're reading a text without that anticipation, the joy of reading is lost. So we need to help children to actually develop that ability to anticipate what is likely to be coming up next. And of course, as I mentioned, silent reading is helpful. But we also falter sometimes. Sometimes we think finger movement, we keep finger on the text and read. We use a lot of lip movement, head movement. We try to vocalize things. We try to read without understanding or awareness of the subject. Sometimes we read word by word. All these are somewhat a faulty, kind of a habit that we should not allow us to develop in the long run. Maybe in the initial stages, that's fine. As children, they would keep their finger on the words and try to read. But as we move forward, we need to be able to gain fluency by honing all those skills that I mentioned. Now, I want to pause here and maybe conclude my speech by bringing a concept which is very interesting. In Christian faith, the concept of word is very interesting, because we have been talking about reading, and we see words are very important, and pictorial information, and many forms we are able to read today. But it's interesting that in the Christian faith, the word called word is called God. So it says, in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and word was with God. That's what in the Bible, John chapter 1 verse 1, it says. And what does that mean? If one tries to analyze what is actually said here, does word denote life? Does word denote thinking, comprehending, speaking, relating, communicating, or basic living? And is word that important? Does it relate to knowledge? Because it says God pronounced and all things came to be. And the only thing it appears, if we read this particular text, that the only thing that existed before anything since the beginning is the word. So the word is, very important. And that's where I think, if you look at the 21st century skills, the concept of inception, inscription, inspiration, interpretation, and interaction are important. These are very interesting concepts. I'll spend a minute or two explaining what I mean and conclude my speech. When it comes to a word being presented by an author, he or she incepts that idea. And inception is different from conception. Conception is an image or an idea or a notion formed in mind, whereas inception is the creation of that idea itself. So when you have that inception and move to conception, you can inscribe it. You inscribe it in multiple ways, whether it is in the form of writing, whether it is in the form of pictorial information, painting, or presenting that information in infographics, or whichever way that you want to inscribe, you can inscribe. But in order for a reader, a learner, to actually relate with that inscribed word, we need that inspiration. We need to be inspired, and that inspiration comes from our willingness to read, willingness to pay attention, willingness to actually have that memory, that attention span, and the background knowledge with which we are inspired to actually read. Only when we do so, we are able to interpret the text that's presented to our life. We can interpret in multiple ways. This is where critical thinking, reasoning, analytical thinking, all these are important, that not only we use the reading skills, which I mentioned, silent reading to fluency, to comprehension, to reading the wholesome. We use the 21st century skills of critical thinking, analytical thinking, and comprehension and cohesion to interpret on the basis of the context in which we live. Then we can interact. We interact with the world. We undertake action out of what we read in order to actually being productive, accountable, being global citizens. So when it comes to word, or the word that is presented, these concepts of inception, inscription, inspiration, interpretation, and interaction are quite important for us to take home. So friends, when it comes to surviving in the 21st century, it's important for us to not only be agile to the demands of the 21st century, and there are a lot of skills identified as successful skills people ought to have. But in order to have those skills, when we face work-life situation, when we enter into a career, we need to invest our time in reading, in gaining and honing and developing those skills that I mentioned in terms of reading, comprehending, and having the ability to actually nurture these skills over a period of time so that we can survive in the 21st century. Thank you, Dr. Balagopal, Dr. Vignesh, and colleagues for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts, but also very many thanks to the audience who patiently listened to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shadrach, for this wonderful session. We learned a lot of 21st century skills in order to be relevant and in this project. So now, can we take a couple of questions from the audience? If you raise your hands, I can allow you to talk, and it should be a question, and um, please be very brief in your question. So I think Miss Asha Gupta has raised her question hand. I'm going to allow her. Miss Asha, over to you. Please kindly unmute yourself and you can talk. Okay, so I think she has not yet unmuted herself. Now I'm requesting Miss Tulshi Tiwari.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vignesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Kindly go ahead. Please be brief.
Yeah, I appreciate this talk. Every word makes sense. And I wish everything is going to happen. But two questions. One is, how do you see where it is going to begin from? In current context, these qualities we are talking about, 21st century skills, not even in 1% or 2% population, in all decision makers also. How do you see it beginning really, and how many years you think the critical mass getting going? 10 years, 15, 20 years? Thank you.
Can we gather more questions and maybe
Yes,
to
there is a
make it?
question from one of the participants. There is a question from Ms. Bhuvaneshwari. Students are not interested in reading books. What is the reason? And there is another question from Ms. Deepa Das. How to make children draw to books in this digital world? So these are the two questions that have come. So you may want to respond to it, Shadi.
Thank you. I think these are all very important questions, and let me answer the first question. How many years would it take for us to have that global citizen-oriented approach? Because as rightly pointed out by Mr. Tulsi Tawari, we do see that even the policymakers and the so-called leadership are unable to demonstrate that ability that the 21st century governance ability. Part of the reason is they've probably not read enough in their lifetime. And where should it begin? It should begin in schools. It should begin in the early childhood. And that's where it is important for our teachers to play a very critical role in inculcating that reading habit. So I mentioned that, decoding to comprehension to developing, honing the skills in a manner that they are able to demonstrate the 21st century skills as they come out of their the formal education. It's important for us to inculcate this. But the question the other two teachers asked are equally relevant. And children are not interested in reading. It's very difficult to encourage them to read. It's very, very difficult to push them into something that they are not prepared to do so. But, I would think that, children actually develop a distaste for reading due to a variety of reasons. Maybe they have not been introduced to reading and appreciating the text and literature that they've been presented, whether as children in pictorial formats or in rhymic formats, and in many multiple ways of indulging them in reading. So I think if we miss that opportunity in the early childhood, the child as it grows does not really turn to books. So I think while the children are at our hand in the early childhood, we need to really, really enable them, encourage them to read. And that's where, we as teachers have a responsibility, and, give enough material to them. And what happens, one of the goals of many non-governmental organizations that work in the reading domain is that to put resources in the hands of children, reading resources in the hands of children, so that they develop very early the ability to read. But, there was a survey, interestingly, in the United States as to who hasn't read a book in the last 12 months. And the survey really shows that, some 27% of US adults haven't read a book in the last year or so, whether in print or electronic or audio format. So this is an interesting fact. And it seems men are likely to not read text as compared to women. And, people who have lower educational attainment, not done beyond high school, are less likely to read and increase the usage of reading in their daily life. So it's essentially reading, and 21st century survival is to begin very early in our lives. And we need to develop our own skills to introduce children to books, children to text. And that's where the teachers have an important role to play.
Thank you, Shadi. And there are two more questions. One is from Ms. Sweta, and another one is from Ms. Hina Mukherjee. So the question from Ms. Sweta is, in this pandemic period, library is not given importance. So what efforts can a librarian take to give importance of libraries to children? And there is a further comment from Ms. Deepa Das about children nowadays don't feel like reading books. So that's a comment from her. But Ms. Hina Mukherjee has said, can reading not be encouraged at homes? How do we as teachers only contribute to developing the interest of reading? So that's an interesting question. So you may want to respond to that.
Yeah. Let me answer the second question first. Oftentimes as teachers, when we have the parent-teacher association meeting, we give feedback on children to the parents. And let me ask this question. How many of us have asked the parents whether the children are reading at home, whether the parents themselves read at home? I think it's an important question to ask. As much we give feedback on children, on their behavior, their performance in the subjects, and their comprehension, their relational issues within the school, we also need to actually bring the onus of the parents to demonstrate that reading is important also at home. And not only forcing or encouraging children to read. There is no way that we can force children to read. We need to actually enable them to develop that interest in reading. And in order to do that, how many of us read together as family? In a public library in Chile, there is a room where parents and infants read together, and they bring their children of 6-month-old children into the library. And you always find in these libraries at least 30-40 parents with their infants sitting there and reading. And that's how they develop the ability for the children to start reading very early. And they have the luxury of actually taking the children to the libraries, because there are libraries are well maintained, prominent, and even before the child gets a birth certificate, child gets a library membership. And the public libraries coordinate with the medical system, and the moment a child is born, they are sent a kit, a birthday, a gift for the child that has arrived. So there are initiatives of this kind, and we cannot really see this happen in India for a long time to come. But I think the schools have equally an opportunity here. And we celebrate birthdays of children, and they bring cakes and whatnot. And I wonder if the school would charge 100 rupees more for the child, for a birthday gift or a book gifting program of the school. And if teachers are able to select the right books and don't, gift those for birthdays for children, that's one way to actually encourage. And even the Prime Minister was gifted by Dr. Balagopal when he launched the reading mission, a book. This is a philosophy of Dr. P.N. Panikar. He donated a book for birthdays and anniversaries and special occasions. I think it's important for us to develop this. Now, in the pandemic times, when the schools are closed, how do we engage children, and how do the libraries offer services to children? Interestingly, the Anna Centenary Library in Chennai wants to emulate the model of the Singapore Public Library, which uses Uber drivers as volunteers to actually provide books at home. I wonder, if a bunch of libraries, or even if a school thinks about doing a survey among the parents or the students, whether they would like the library to send books to them at their homes. And if there is a kind of a collection point where the children or parents could come and collect, or if you could allow the parents to come and collect books from your library, 10 books for each child. You can, at this point in time, all the books are sitting idle in your library. Why not, send 80% of your books out to your children and put the books in their hands? It only requires once a month for your school bus to carry these books and distribute. So there are very many innovative ways of libraries being useful even during the pandemic times to reach out to children. Not only, nowadays I find schools very proactive in providing project work and holiday homework, and also online teaching. But unfortunately, the libraries have stayed behind the race. And this is where we need to think about a proactive way of either distributing digital books to children, give them access, maybe change our procurement process, or even, if you think it is necessary to distribute using your own school buses to drivers to go around and distribute. There are various ways you can do so.
Thank you so much, Shadi. There are at least some like 20 additional questions. So I will just pick up last two questions. One question is around, so from Ms. Gayatri, in the pre-primary stage, should we use only phonetics to read, sir? Because I feel my grandfather was quite proficient and fluent, though he was taught phonetically. What should I emphasize as a teacher? So that is one question. And the last question is Professor Advocate Harihara, Mr. Hariharan, I believe. How can you cure bad, wrong reading habits? So these are the final two questions that we are taking for this. Over to you, Shek.
Can you repeat what is the point about the grandfather?
So she used to was not taught. So he was not taught phonetics. So she was emphasizing on phonetics pre-primary stage. Can we use phonetics as a way of teaching to the young children? That was a question.
I think it starts, as I mentioned, the decoding of the words start with the rhymes that we teach children, because rhymes are one wonderful way of enabling children to pronounce and call out. And also rhymes are written in such a manner that, the ability to actually decode words begins there. I don't know if schools have stopped doing this or schools have started to put children in various other activities like painting and drawing and activity-based learning at a very early stage. But when I was a child, in my until very early in my life, I only recited rhymes for almost a year. And in nursery schools, we see this being practiced everywhere. I think that's one best way of taking further. And of course, if teachers are not able to be, able to appreciate this culture of rhyming and gaining that decoding skill, it's going to be very difficult in the long run. So I think it's important for us to use that. Now, when it comes to the second question, how do we correct the bad habits? I think it's this is where we need to give some concession in the early days for children who may falter, but quickly we need to develop that book appreciation activities. And again, I cite this example of Pratham as an organization goes around and conducts some training programs for teachers and librarians as to how to appreciate a book. So oftentimes, as librarians, we look at a book, the title, the contents page, the author, and we remain there. But there is more that we could do as librarians by actually developing a training program to help children to appreciate the content presented in the book, and read with them, and help them to develop all those skills that I talked about, the reading skills, together with them. And it's a great opportunity that the librarians have in terms of when the children come to their, they have the library period, to read with them and to show them how to read together, how to comprehend a sentence, how to infer the author's mood and the meaning that the author is trying to present, how to distinguish opinions and facts, how to actually gain fluency in reading, how to also develop that ability to silently read and comprehend. So all these are at the hands of librarians. They can easily do so.
Thank you so much, Shadi, for these wonderful response to the questions of our participants. Still, we have a lot of questions, but due to time limitation, we will take it up in the next session. With this, we would like to thank Dr. Shadrach for being a resource person for this session, and all the participants who are kind enough to join us for this session. So I'm going to share the feedback form URL for this session in the chat box. So you can mark your attendance, and you can also download your certificate after submitting your feedback form. And tomorrow we have a session on changing pattern of reading in digital environment by Dr. K. Jayakumar. It's going to be tomorrow evening 5:30 p.m. and the registration URL for that session, I'm going to share it in the chat box again. Also, I request you to install the NDLI mobile app for using over 7.2 crore resources that are available in our repository. And I'm going to share the NDLI mobile app URL. And also, we request, maybe I request Dr. Shadrach to speak a minute about the Skills for Work initiative and how they can get benefited from this initiative. If it's
Thank you, Vignesh. The Skills for Work initiative of the Commonwealth of Learning is open to all schools, all school children, particularly school outgoing children. And there are short courses that are available on Coursera, Udemy, Google, that are presented to the children, teachers, and librarians and students. So one can join free of cost. All that they need to do is to ask for a scholarship through the P.N. Panika Foundation, CADUS, which is a partner of the Commonwealth of Learning. And you have a variety of courses around 21st century skills. around reading skills. And not only that, a variety of skills, particularly employable skills that are available. So even during the holiday time, vacation time, if you want your children or you yourself would want to enroll into this program, you could do so. At the end of the day, once you complete, you get a free certificate. And certificates are issued by reputed universities around the world. There are 200 global universities, such as the University of California, the Danish Business School, the John Hopkins University. So there are 200 such universities and many companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and others, Facebook, others participating in the program, providing skills that are employable. So please spread a word about this. The website is call-skillsforwork.org, call-skillsforwork.org. So if you go to this site, you can actually get more details. You can place your application, and upon recommendation from the P.N. Panika Foundation, we will be able to provide scholarship, which means free access to these courses for 6 full months, when you can complete any number of courses and get certified. And these certificates are very helpful in your job search for the future. The Google certification in particular is very interesting because they say that you don't need to have any qualification. Only if you have some reasoning, logical reasoning, and aptitude for pursuing an IT career, even if you are a school dropout, you could actually get the certification if you follow the curriculum. And these are all video-based lectures and practicals that you are expected to indulge in. And at the end of the 6 months, you get a certificate, which actually puts you on a global recruitment database of Google. So 200 companies around the world, for a job vacancy of 1.3 million people, they are recruiting actively. And in 6 months' time, your own associates, students, and people who you know can complete the certification and be eligible for these job offers. And they can work from home, and the minimum salary guaranteed once you get employed is around $50,000 US. So it's an attractive program. You can take a look at our website for more information. But the KDS, P.N. Panika Foundation, is our Indian partner in terms of recruiting people and recommending them to this program. And I would encourage you to also get in touch with Dr. Vignesh and Dr. Balagopal for more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shadi. Over to Balagopalji.
Dr. Shadi, your speech was amazing. In fact, I was also learning and enjoying, because whenever the skills, what about our skilling, reskilling and upskilling is the third three words used by our Prime Minister also in all his speeches. And people are also asking me what is the different aspects of skilling, reskilling and upskilling. And I was really enjoying, and I'm getting more information and knowledge through your wonderful speech. I'm grateful to you for spending the time with us. And in fact, I am requesting the panelist and our also and Dr. Vignesh for his excellent way of organizing these type of webinars. And I request the panelist to join tomorrow also. Tomorrow, Dr. Jay Kumar is the Vice Chancellor. He was the Vice IAS officer. He was our Chief Secretary. Okay, he was former Chief Secretary, and he was the university. He was the Vice Chancellor of two universities, and he's one of the scholars. And he's in the Institute of Management in Government, and he is training the employees of the different government organizations with the management skills. And he is teaching them the management, the science of management, so that our bureaucrats are well equipped to handle things. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Vignesh, Dr. Shadi, and all others. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Shadi, once again, and thanks to all the participants. So with this, we are going to end this session. For people who are not yet registered, they will not be able to submit the feedback form. So when I will share the registration for this registration URL for this session. So that first register yourself for this session, then you submit the feedback. So I'm going to just share the registration URL. So kindly do that. So in case if you have not yet registered, you may not be able to submit the feedback form. So first register yourself and then submit the feedback. Okay. Thank you so much. So with this, we are going to end this session. Thanks, Shadi, and thanks, Balagopalji, and all the participants. Thank you.